we are halfway through the month of March, and we're back with the New York Sports Rapid Rundown to discuss the 3 hottest topics in New York sports this week. Joining me on this episode is a sports journalist who I've been a fan of for a long time. She was a correspondent on my favorite sports show of all time, that is HBO Real Sports, and has worked for The Athletic, Bloomberg, and ESPN. A veteran in the game who undoubtedly loves sports, the one and only Kavitha Davidson. Kavitha, how you doing?
I'm well. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm glad to be here because we have followed each other for a while, and for people who don't know, this is our first time actually meeting each other.
One of those Twitter friendships that we've had for years.
It is, but I'm glad to say this. Now, Kavitha, most weeks I say there's a lot to get into in terms of New York sports, but this week, this one right here, pretty spicy. Okay, we're going to talk about OG Anunoby making his return to the Knicks lineup, the Yankees learning that they will start the season without their ace, but first, we got to talk about the New York Giants. And what a week it was for the New York Giants. NFL free agency started this week. Kavitha and running back Saquon Barkley, he gave the Giants a peace sign. The tailback agreed to terms with the Philadelphia Eagles on a 3-year, $37.5 million contract that includes $26 million guaranteed at signing. Now, look, we know that Barkley had been looking to secure the bag here on a long-term contract for quite a few years, but now he bounces to a division rival. Did the G-men make a mistake in letting Barkley go, or was this the right move for Big Blue?
I think that's a really hard question to answer. I think it's the wrong move if you're a fan and you loved watching Saquon these last 6 years and you thought, you know, they built this team around him and they had one playoff win to show for it, right? But the money is really what it came down to. And Saquon deserves the bag, and I'm happy he's getting it. Not so happy as a fan of the Giants that he's getting it, you know, in Philly. But it seems like the Giants are really trying to build through trades and through the draft. And I think that that's what this comes down to. You saw them acquire John Runyon. You saw them try and shore up the offensive line. You saw with Brian Burns that they're trying to get some edge rushing in there. And that seems to be what this new front office is moving forward with. So I wish Saquon the best, but it clearly wasn't working out here.
Yeah, it sounds to me like probably a little bit more of a level-headed Giants fans, not too salty about this. But some Giants fans were not happy about this at all. And I think I agree with you in the fact that it comes down to money, as most things do in these situations. Now, speaking of Giants fans who were not happy, we saw things get spicy this week with the war words between former Giants running back and WFAN host Tiki Barber, who said Saquon is, quote, dead to me. Kavitha, when's the last time somebody said you were dead to them? Is that?
I don't think I've ever heard that,
okay.
So let's not start that now.
Yeah, let's not start that. Nobody's ever said that to me, not now, and hopefully never. But Saquon, he clapped back on Twitter. He questioned Barber's former loyalty to the Giants, called Barber a hater. Two-part question for me here. Whether Tiki was joking or not, are both sides, A, doing too much here? And should Big Blue fans, should they be salty that Saquon is no longer in a Giants uniform?
Look, the nature of fandom is that it's irrational, and it's okay to be irrational.
Fair.
That's part of what's fun about sports and about this. I think both sides are doing what they're kind of supposed to do. You know, they're drumming up a little bit of controversy, some headlines. It's kind of well-meaning, I think, on both sides. I don't think these two guys actually hate each other, right? And I don't think most Giants fans, when, you know, the dust kind of settles, will end up hating Saquon. But, you know, it hurts when you see a player go to a division rival, a heated rival like that. It makes it a little better that the Cowboys have done nothing, right? But no, I mean, I think that we should take all of this with a little bit of grain of salt and kind of let it play out. Now, the tampering investigation is where this actually does get a little bit interesting.
Yeah, it does get interesting. I want to talk about that because when you look at the tampering investigation, the first thing that came to mind for me was, do the Giants even care about this, right? Like, if they clearly have moved on from Saquon, right? And they've said, okay, we're going to go. Do they care? Will the Eagles get in trouble? Does anybody care about tampering in sports, whether it's the NFL, NBA, or whatever?
We have this conversation every time free agency hits, right? When, like, 2 minutes into free agency, we kind of suspect that there have been some conversations going on that may or may not have involved the agents, right? I don't think anybody actually cares about tampering, but they have to kind of perform that they do and, like, adhere to league rules. So this is what we're seeing play out here. I don't see this really going very far, but it's interesting that this is launching right now.
Yeah, it is. I think it's a little performative there. It's not going anywhere, but we will see what happens. Giants fans, Kavitha, who is a Giants fan, she's not that salty about it. She understands the business. She understands what it is, but it's been an interesting start to free agency for the New York Giants. We're going to talk some Knicks basketball because the New York Knicks, they got a little healthier this week. We saw this forward OG Anunoby return to the rotation. Fans have been waiting for this for quite some time, Kavitha. And look, he had an immediate impact with the Knicks this week. How much do you think that his return to the lineup will help the Knicks throughout the final month of this regular season?
It's huge. I mean, you saw that immediate impact, and it's interesting that it was against the Sixers because you also saw what the Knicks looked like last week when they didn't have OG in the lineup and how listless they were on both ends of the ball, right? What's fascinating about OG, and Tom Thibodeau has refused to say whether he's playing him in the 3 or the 4, is that he can kind of play anywhere. And when he does, he creates so much space on the other side of the ball. He brings such physicality to wing defense, and you can see the effect that he has on every other player on the lineup that he's not actually guarding against, and that's really fascinating to see. I love that he's back. You see that immediate impact, and you know, it's only good things going forward. It was a great trade.
It was a great trade, and the dividends have paid off earlier. They are 14-2 now in games that they've played with OG Anunoby. A little bit of a scare the other night with Portland because he tweaked his elbow. Mm-hmm. You think it's really important for him to be on the court, I assume, and also just be healthy down the stretch for the Knicks, right?
To be healthy. I mean, you see that. I believe the stat is that at every 100 possessions, the Knicks score 30 more points when OG's on the floor. It
was 32.6
there you go.
100 possessions before going to the Portland game.
Right. So, I mean, that's like numbers don't lie, right? Like you see that. But even just like with the eye test, you see how much more confident the Knicks are when he's on the floor, and you see that it's not up to one person to just throw up a bunch of shots. He creates those possessions for other people just by his physicality and his spacing, and it's as a Knicks fan, as a born and raised Knicks fan, it's nice to see him back.
It's a breath of fresh air to see the impact on defense and offense from OG Anunoby. And I'll ask you this too, before we get to this next part of the Knicks. How far do you think the Knicks can go this year? Because you're a born and raised Knicks fan.
As a born and raised Knicks fan, you always try not to be overconfident.
Understood. Understood.
I don't think this is a championship team yet. It's also not a fully healthy team, as we know, which we'll talk about. I think that this is a team that can make some really surprising moves in the postseason, though, and you could be looking at an Eastern Conference final here now. Boston is hard, and the Knicks, you know, have one good game against Boston under their belt, but all the other matchups have been really discouraging. So I think that's the obvious hurdle here in the East.
All right, Kavitha with some measured optimism, not jumping out the window here. Some Knicks fans saying they're going to win the championship. We had people say,
yeah, but Knicks fans, you give us an inch and we will take it and run with it.
Do I know? Do I know? And have I seen this? We're both born and raised New Yorkers and grew up Knicks fans. We've seen this. We've known this. Now, speaking of the health that you mentioned, right? Because this week, SNY's Ian Begley said on his show, The Putback, that, quote, people within the organization think that Julius Randle is going to come back this season. It's just a matter of when and how he deals with the contact with his shoulder injury when he's back on the court. Kavitha, there's no doubt that the Knicks could use Randle back on the court, but are you concerned that he can play the kind of basketball that we've usually seen him play, very physical, with this shoulder injury?
Yeah, it's exactly his style of play that worries me here. As you said, extremely physical. When he came back after injuring himself at the end of last season, he was down to 41% from the floor and 28% from three, and that was an ankle. This is a shoulder, right? So that's really worrying. I think that people within the Knicks organization also, I believe Ian Begley reported this, that they're worried that it's taken him so long. Now, they're being cautious about it, which I think is the right move. But when he comes back, we don't know at what percent he's going to be. We don't know how it's going to affect him. You know, all kinds of mental stuff happen when you come back from an injury also. If he's just going to subconsciously not be as physical as he's used to being, or if he's just going to put it all out there and risk another injury. So there's a lot of questions going forward. But obviously, the Knicks could really use Julius Randle.
I love that you brought the mental aspect there, too, right? Because if you don't play with the same kind of tenacity that you're used to playing with, that can also impact the rest of the team. We just talked about the impact of OG Anunoby, how much you've liked seeing what he's done on the court. So if Julius Randle comes back, I think Knicks fans are going to want him to come back right and healthy.
Well, and you also see what happens to the Knicks when any one of their players on the floor just goes cold, right? The streaky shooting is still something to worry about. And, you know, if you're coming back from injury, there's no guard against that.
That's a good point. Fantastic point there. Okay, but see, like I said, Kavitha not jumping out the window, a measured Knicks fan, and we'll see if the Knicks can get healthy and right as they move towards the playoffs. Now we're going to talk some baseball. Opening day is now under 2 weeks away, and the Yankees learned this week that their ace, Gerrit Cole, is going to be out 1 to 2 months, Kavitha, with an ailing pitching elbow. The ace, he did have a clean MRI, but here's the thing. If Cole misses, let's say 2 or 3 months, how concerned should Yankee fans be about this injury? And if, at best, Cole's out for, let's just say, even 2 months on the low end, does this change your view of expectations for the Yankees this season?
Well, look, I think pitching was always going to be the question mark for the Yankees going into April. You'd rather an injury like this happen at the beginning of the season than in September, so there's that. And obviously, this kind of puts Brian Cashman under the fire to get another pitcher. Obviously, Blake Snell is top of that list, Jordan Montgomery as well. And if I'm Scott Boras, I'm salivating at this Gerrit Cole news because of what that could mean for his clients. The good news is that it seems Gerrit Cole doesn't need Tommy John, which is, that's a year plus of recovery. But this really does put a lot of pressure on what kind of should just be the middle of the rotation. Now, Nestor Cortes has proven himself, and he's fantastic. He'll be the opening day starter. And opening day, while that means a lot to us as fans or media, it doesn't actually mean a lot in the scheme of 162 games, right? But if we can get, if the Yankees can get Gerrit Cole back by June and add a 5th pitcher, then they'll be in better shape. Now, they were never going to have the best rotation in the league, but Gerrit Cole is also a workhorse. That's the part of this that I think we're missing. I believe since 2019, he has the most innings under himself by far. So in the last half a decade, in the last 5 years, he has been the most prolific pitcher in baseball. So obviously that's going to be something that the Yankees miss.
Yeah, you're going to miss his durability for sure, no doubt about that, and he's pitched very well under durability. You talked about the fact of Brian Cashman being on the hot seat, which he was last year, and Yankee fans were...
He's always on the hot seat.
He's always on the hot seat because he's the general manager of the Yankees. Should Brian Cashman and the Yankees, with this news, and knowing that, okay, low end, I said 2 months, could even be a month, maybe he just misses a month, should they go and try to add another starting pitcher, whether it's via trade or free agency? Blake Snell, you just mentioned, is out there. Do you think they should add another starting pitcher to this rotation with this news surrounding Gerrit Cole?
I mean, I think a lot of people would have said rightfully that they needed to add another pitcher, whether or not even before this Gerrit Cole news. So absolutely, I think that has to be in the game plan. Now, there are drawbacks and pluses for both Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery. Blake Snell can fall into a pattern where he's just walking a bunch of batters. Jordan Montgomery doesn't have great velocity, which we know from his time in the Yankees, even though he was a great pitcher when he was on the team. The other part of this is that the Yankees traded away a lot of pitching prospects to get Juan Soto. Now, he's a generational talent, so that was a calculated risk. But, the Yankees have proven that they can develop pitching talent, so now they've just got to figure out if they're going to be able to do that with what they have left, or if they're going to go spend the money on someone like a Blake Snell. It's
going to be interesting to do, but if you're Blake Snell, you talked about being a Scott Boras client. He's like, yesterday's price is not today's price. It has gone up. I'm going to try to get my client paid a little bit more.
He's got what they call leverage.
He's got a little bit of leverage here. Now, it's funny. We got your other 2 teams. We got that you are a Giants fan. You grew up a Giants fan. You grew up a Knicks fan. On the baseball side, who were you rooting for?
I grew up a Yankees fan. I grew up two stops away from Yankee Stadium. My first live sporting event was a class trip to Yankee Stadium in '96. I still have the bobblehead from that day. So yeah, baseball, like the Knicks were my first love, and I got that from my mother because my mother loved Bernard King. But the Yankees are the reason I do this for a living.
Oh, okay. So the Yankees, there you go. Okay, so we found out all of Kavitha's teams.
And I realize I'm on a Mets network right now saying that. However,
you were fine. You were fine. You're in the company. I grew up rooting for the Mets, and still got love for you. You were fine. But we will see how the Yankees do. Tough news with Gerrit Cole. As Kavitha said, it has been said that he will not need Tommy John surgery. Hopefully that's good news for the Yankee fans and the Yankees moving forward. Kavitha, Women's History Month. I've made sure that we've had great women's voices in sports journalism come here this month to talk.
And we appreciate that so much.
Well, no, I appreciate you guys. I'm such fans, especially if you, fan of what you do and fan of what so many of the ladies that have come up here to talk about and do. And with this being Women's History Month and me being so glad to have you here as one of the great women working in sports journalism, I think as sports journalists, right, we're always inspired by those who've come before us. So I wanted to ask you, who were the women that inspired you to pursue a career in sports journalism, and how did those women impact your career?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking about this question a lot because legacy matters so much in our industry, right? And especially with how much progress has been made in, quite frankly, a short time. Growing up, the woman who was the voice and still is the voice of the Yankees, Susan Waldman, is, and people have very polarized thoughts about Susan. I have met her. I've interviewed her. I think she is a powerhouse. She is a Hall of Famer. And just her voice being in my head and knowing that you can call games and sound like a woman and have that voice is extremely inspiring to me. And the fact that she's been able to do it for so many decades. Susan also has a really fascinating story where she started on Broadway. She started on Man of La Mancha. And Broadway told her that her voice was outdated for where the industry was going. So it's interesting that she took that and applied it to radio. The other woman that I'll point out, and I have been very lucky to meet her, is Ms. Claire Smith. The first Black woman to gain access to a locker room, has more stories, will forget more about baseball than you and I will ever know. I was really lucky to actually be able to sit down and watch a game with her over the summer. I'm on the board of directors of the Yogi Berra Museum, and we had a Yogi Day at the stadium. And I just got to sit down for 3 hours and watch baseball with Claire Smith. And she would, it's not the same stadium, obviously, that she covered in, but, she would point to a dugout and say, this is where Dusty Baker told me this thing, or this is where, I remember this happening with the Royals. And to be able to see her still standing proud, and now she's doing this great work for students at Temple University, she's one of the biggest inspirations.
That's great to hear about two of your inspirations, and obviously around the sport that you love in baseball. And I was listening to you say that, and I thought to myself, okay, when you get to where we are sort of in our careers, right, we've done this for a little bit, you also have people who look up to you, which makes me feel weird sometimes and makes you realize how long I've been doing this.
Right.
But as a woman doing it, you had these women that you looked up to. You now have young girls who look up to you. What's that experience like? Because I know what it's like for me as a Black journalist when I have young Black kids that are thinking about doing this, say they look up to me or talking about it. But what's that experience like to you for young women and knowing that you're inspiring the next generation of female sports journalists?
Well, thank you. I think it's a little overstated, but I appreciate that. It's wild. It really is wild. I never thought of myself as a role model. You hear athletes say this all the time, right? You're just trying to keep your head down and do your work. But then I go to high schools, I go to colleges, and I talk to students, and we're getting to the point where it doesn't even occur to them that they're women in this industry. And that's part of the goal, right? Is that, you don't want it to continue to be this thing. Serena Williams will always say, I'm not the greatest woman athlete, I'm the greatest athlete, right? And I want people to think of myself like that. And to see these young women, the next generation really is our future. And to see them have that kind of confidence. And the other thing I'll say is, to be able to see the space continue to expand for women. Because if you talk to anybody, if you talk to Claire or Susan or anybody who came up 10, 20, 30 years ago, there was maybe one or two spots, right? There was sideline reporting, there was maybe one print reporting job, and now you see this plethora of different things that women can do, and they can be funny, and they can be serious, and they can be investigative, and they can have personality, and that's really, I think that's really where we're seeing that progress, and it's humbling to be a small part of that.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely a part of it. Yeah, I know why it's humbling, and I know why it sometimes may feel overstated, as you say, but no, there's no doubt that you're a part of it. And look, you got to be a part of the New York Sports Rapid Rundown. I'm glad to have you here on the show.
I'm so excited to be here. This was so much fun.
This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we finally got to meet and connect for a show. Who knew that's how it was going to happen? But it did. That is Kavitha Davidson. Check out her work. One of the best in the game. Seriously, best sports journalist you will find. Kavitha, we'll do this again for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dexter.
We'll see you guys next time on the New York Sports Rapid Rundown.